Hey, what's happening, guys? Dan Darrow here with another options and play video update. So, don't need any introduction for our Friday videos. This one is going to be a long one, so I apologize in advance. But next week is absolutely packed. It's the biggest week of earnings for this quarter. Just a ton of big names. So try to write out the video because I mean basically every single day there's just numerous companies reporting. I didn't even do all of them. Just trying to focus on like some of like the bigger names or the highlights. So even the ones like I didn't cover. I mean, plenty of other interesting ones too. All right. So we're gonna get right into it here. Really nothing that interests me much Monday before the open. After the close, actually, really only one name too, Whirlpool. So 9.5 points was priced in for the client's name here. And to be honest, I'm not that big of a fan of this setup. Like it hasn't really had like a clean move, like a really clean big move since actually last January. Um, and just been kind of like chopping around. It hasn't really been in play, and it's kind of like a long shot pattern to me. And with options on the higher end at 9.5, it seems like an overall like a tough setup. So probably going to hold off. I've traded this in the past, but I think this quarter I'm going to hold off. All right, Tuesday morning, things get going. 3M. So about 9 points is what's priced in on this big industrial morning. So a few other big industrials too. So this is a pretty good recent history of moving. Past two quarters were more muted, so option pricing maybe ticking down a tiny bit because of that. First major industrial to report, so I like those. Um, and because of that, higher uncertainty, right? Setup seems decent. Option pricing seems decent. So I'm thinking some sort of volatility strategy, maybe something to get the overall risk down, but one of the more interesting setups. Lockheed Martin, just been an absolute powerhouse. It jumped on the that Iran headline a couple weeks ago, and it's really held on to the gains. They're pricing at 13 points for earnings, and the problem with Lockheed is that it's up so much going in, and it actually hasn't really reacted well to earnings the last two quarters. So it sold off after decent numbers recently. So after the run it's had, maybe you're looking for something similar, like some sort of pullback, even if like the numbers are like strong. That's what I'm thinking with that. UTX, another industrial. So 5 points was priced in. Very bullish chart, and it doesn't seem as extended to me. Recent quarters have been solid, but overall stock movement hasn't really been that big in response. Um, I don't I wouldn't be expecting a huge move, but it does seem like it could continue higher, so there could be more upside. But at 5 points, that does seem to be kind of towards the top end of what this moves. So probably have to get risk down with like spreads or flies, something to get that volatility premium down a bit. All right, after the close Tuesday, giddy up. AMD. So 475 is what's priced in. I mean, it's just been on an epic run since October. It's basically up 100%, give or take. And we traded this a couple times. So into earnings, after earnings. I mean, it's been a fantastic stock. And the problem is that after this type of move, expectations are just astronomically high. Options are expensive. I know Intel had a huge beat, but is that a good thing for AMD or a bad thing? It's kind of hard. So I'm not really feeling this setup. I'm probably going to avoid it, but it did treat us pretty well recently. So I'll be keeping an eye on it for a swing, possibly after earnings. Apple, what do you do with this? It's a legitimate question. I really have no idea. Pricing in 17 points, and I mean, it's almost single-handedly lifted the market for 2 months. It's up just a massive amount in a short period, and expectations are sky high. Options seem expensive. As much as I would like to trade this, I just don't see any opportunity. I really don't. I don't know how else to describe it. I have no idea what to do with it. Don't see a setup that I like, so I'm probably going to avoid it. Starbucks, 4 points is what's priced in. Had a huge move in July and then a more muted move in October. Stock broke through some recent resistance and it's acting a little bit better. I do feel like there's room either way. But because it hasn't been as consistent from like a movement point of view around earnings, I think it's more of a wild card. So it would, if I did something with it, it would probably be like lower debit, um, probably more speculative. But I think it's possible. Maybe you see like a 5 or 6 point move if it's like particularly good or particularly bad. Xilinx, 725 is what's priced on for Xilinx. Kind of an interesting left for dead semi. One of like the rare chip stocks that's well off its 52-week highs. There's not too many of them. The Huawei ban really hurt this one, and last quarter's guidance was just brutal. There's been a ton of bullish positioning on it recently, and I mean it could really be set for like a pretty big catch-up move to the sector if the numbers are solid. But I mean they're really going to have to deliver because the last couple quarters have not been particularly good. All right, Wednesday before the open, Boeing. This one should be interesting. 15 points is what's priced in, and I don't have the slightest clue what to expect. I mean, numbers, I can't imagine they're going to be very good, but expectations are probably very, very, very low at this point. I mean, technically, it looks broken. It looks like it has more room lower. Momentum is to the downside. So I'd probably be focused more on the bear side. But the way I look at this is either earnings or non-event in the sense that people aren't really like they don't really care about this quarter and the next quarter because it's still like there's so much going on at the company outside of earnings and revenues, or it could be like a really big mover if yeah, I mean I guess I'm leaning more towards maybe less of a mover, but I mean it's such like a wild card. I really have no idea what to expect. GLW, $1.85 is what's priced in on this. Very consistent mover, and I might just go with history because this one has kind of like a pretty typical move on earnings, like up or down of over 2.5 points, and it's only priced in at about $1.85. So options are priced in what it typically moves. So strangle, straddle, some sort of volatility strategy is the idea. GE. 80 cents. So is the turnaround real or not? Because if the turnaround's real and they can deliver another number like they did last quarter in October, I mean, you can see the potential in the chart, right? I mean, acting pretty good, coming off a pretty good quarter. So if they can deliver, I mean, the momentum could really start to ramp on the upside here. So I feel like the options seem a little bit underpriced on this, just based off last quarter, what it's done, what the technical setup looks like. So, point wise, it might not be huge. Percent wise, though, could be interesting. McDonald's. All right. McDonald's is priced in 6.5. This thing was smashed last quarter. It's come all the way back. And options aren't cheap on this, but they also seem low compared to the last quarter move in the recent run it's had. I'm thinking bearish biased on this. I mean, last quarter wasn't particularly great, and it hasn't had the particularly strong reactions to earnings over the last year. So, coming off a weak quarter, had a huge rally, and I don't know. It seems like it's more set up to like a bearish strategy. MasterCard, 1075 is what's priced in. Huge run. Expectations are very high. Options are pricey. I have traded this in the past, but I just don't see a reason to get involved for an earnings trade, so I'm probably avoiding. All right. After the close Wednesday, Invisalign. So 30 points is what's priced in on this medtech name. It should be a pretty big point mover. I mean, it's priced in at 30, but I expect it to be a pretty big mover too. Two big earnings reactions in a row, so just absolutely crushed, and now it's come back. I guess like the issue is like at 30 points, like I don't know if there's like a ton more room either way. I think it could legitimately move 25 to 30 because that seems reasonable based on what it's done recently in the chart. But like again, I mean options are priced in 30, so it's kind of tough. So I feel like the only way to really play this you would have to get risk down somehow. So like spreads or something just to get that overall debit down. Facebook, big name, big name. 12.5 points. What's priced in here? So kind of like you're gonna hear me say it, but same story, different FANG stock, right? So Apple's had a huge run, Facebook's had a pretty huge run too. Expectations are high. The one thing that's a little bit different about Facebook is that it's just now getting back through that the high from 2 years ago when it collapsed. So maybe this one possibly a little bit more upside potential versus like an Apple, and I'll talk about Microsoft in a second. Maybe this one has a little bit more upside potential. So maybe look at something, maybe some like low debit, like cheaper upside, bullish trade idea. Lamb, 21 points. What's priced in for this semi? Uh, it's broken record here, but massive run, high expectations, expensive options. Peer ASML just reported this week and basically did nothing on its report. So options just seem too pricey for me to get involved. So I'm probably just going to watch this one, or maybe I'll look at like AMAT or CLAC for like a sympathy trade. Microsoft 675. That's what's priced in on big cloud titan here. I mean, it's literally like the same thing. I mean, it's just the stock is up so much since last quarter. Options are expensive. Expectations are high. And everybody's expecting to beat because they've just been beaten and raising for like the last 2 years. So I just I wouldn't mind if it pulled back after earnings and gave an opportunity for a swing trade, but in terms of like an actual earnings strategy, I just don't think I'm going to do anything with it. PayPal, 625 is what's priced in here. Had a weaker quarter in July, and then rebounded back in October, but on a nice run. Still hasn't technically closed the gap, so maybe if they can like deliver a decent print, maybe you get like the extra like 4 or 5 points to close the gap from that July miss. So something to keep an eye on there. Corvo, chip stock. So just a huge breakout, and it's been like a kind of like one of the better chip stocks since then. 11.5 points is what's priced in. Those are monthly options though, I mean, the semis have been crushing numbers. 5G related stocks have been fantastic. So I feel like numbers should be strong again, and there might be some more upside potential, especially after this recent dip. So I'm thinking some sort of bullish strategy on that one. Tesla, oh boy, 73 points, give or take. I mean, those options are moving even as I'm talking here. Easily the biggest wild card of the week. The stock has been absolutely parabolic since the last reported, which I'll admit was a shockingly good report. Expectations are ridiculously high, but at the same time, momentum is so strong. Short interest is still high. I mean, there could still be a pretty crazy move here. I have absolutely no opinion on this whatsoever. Like, I haven't really been trading it. I don't know what to do with it. I mean, you got to pay, like I said, over 70, almost 73 points to get involved on this. And I mean, if you have conviction with it, that's great. Personally, I don't, so I probably won't do anything with it. But I mean, this really could be one of the wild ones next week. NOW. So 22 points is what's priced in on this, and I mean, what a difference a quarter makes. I mean, it basically bottomed out into October earnings, and now it's come all the way back. It's at a 52-week high into January earnings. So it's 100 points, just about 100 points off its low. It's a solid name, but the problem is like earnings reactions really haven't been that great recently, and in the sector specifically. So like earnings reactions in the software sector haven't been that great. So I'm still like real hesitant to like trade these types of names around earnings. So it's probably either going to be an avoid, or maybe look at like a sympathy trade on even like a Salesforce or a Workday, because both of those might react to this. All right, continuing on here. Before the open, Thursday, Biogen, 17.5 points is what's priced in for this report. So October earnings release was all about the Alzheimer's update. And personally, I feel like this quarter could be kind of like a non-event unless they give another update on that Alzheimer's progress with the FDA. Or there's like a pretty big patent case that people are watching, which if they give an update on that, maybe it could be a big mover. But, if it's just EPS and revenues, I'm not really sure it's going to move the needle much for Biogen. Granger, this could be a big point mover for the week. 20 points is what they're looking for. So Fastenal gave this a huge boost back in October, but then Grainger actually missed on their own report. Now this quarter, Fastenal missed, and now you're like, oh, is Grainger set up now for like a pretty big trade, right? Because that'd be 2 quarters in a row for Grainger to have missed. So I mean, 20 points. It might seem like a lot, but it actually doesn't seem that bad from a pricing perspective, and it does seem like it could leave some room either way. So might look at a strangle on that one. All right, UPS. So this one is really only interesting because FedEx has been so bad. 575 is what they're looking for next week, and it's obviously separated itself from FedEx. And the stock very coiled. You can see. I mean, just for like the last like 5-6 months, just been kind of treading water in this higher range here. It got hit last quarter, didn't stay down long, put in a new high, and now it's rolled back down. I mean, I got burned on the options last quarter because I didn't cover quick enough. I'm still interested in this, but because of that, I might look at something lower debit, lower risk, something a little bit further out of the money. Just thinking like, if it's going to break the range, then maybe you could see like a 10 plus point move. If it gets up into like the 120s or down into like the gap from July. But that's probably the only way I would do something with UPS. All right, after the close Thursday, Amazon, 86 points is what they're looking for. This might be the most interesting FANG name. Actually, it probably is the most interesting FANG name this quarter because it's obviously been lagging, and it's the holiday quarter, so even more important. Volatility probably should be higher. Last quarter was pretty weak, but the stock didn't stay down long. It seems like this type of pattern, it has more upside potential if they can deliver a solid print, but it's really going to have to be solid because the last few quarters have been mixed. So if it is solid, it could play catch up to its peers, and I mean that would mean basically a move back through 2000. So quite a bit of upside, and it wouldn't surprise me if it played out quick. So I feel like I lean more bullish on this, but it has recently been kind of disappointing around earnings, so definitely something to take into account. Amgen. So it got absolutely crushed today. You can see here a huge leg lower. They're pricing at 8 points for next week, and it's lost its higher range. Recent reports haven't been huge bullish events, even though the numbers have been pretty solid. But I mean, like the way I look at it is that like it kind of got washed out, and whereas it has a history of maybe like not great moves on earnings. Like this was like a top name, and it got hit really hard into numbers. So maybe you can look for like some sort of like snapback move. I mean, this is later in the week, so I got to see where it is then. But maybe looking for like a snapback move up into like the mid to high 230s. Yay! So 7 points is what's priced in here. Finally broke its long range, which you can see, and it's been kind of rallying pretty steadily up into earnings. It doesn't always respond to numbers though, so that's what makes like the 7 points to me kind of expensive. It last quarter was solid, but the stock really didn't do much. So it seems like a more bullish setup, but it also is not very consistent in terms of like moving when around earnings. So it's probably going to be an avoid from that perspective. Is that the options seem kind of expensive? I like the setup, but the options are kind of keeping me away from it. Visa, so 675 is what's priced in. I mean, basically the exact same setup as Mastercard. So we'll see what Mastercard says, see what the stock does, and then if Visa has a really big reaction to those Mastercard numbers, then maybe we can go against the grain on it. But other than that, probably won't do anything with it. Western Digital. So 5.5 points it was priced in. This was crushed in October, come all the way back and then some. I mean, it's hard to figure out where expectations are, but I actually don't mind this from like a option pricing point of view because I mean the options are really only about like half of what it moved last quarter, and even though it's had a pretty big run, when I go out for it, you can see that it's still way off its 2018 high. So like it's up a lot in a short period, last quarter wasn't particularly good and got crushed. So there seems to be like a good combination of things saying that this could be a pretty big mover. Some sort of volatility strategy might be interesting. All right, wrapping up the week. Friday before the open, cat, the big cat. They've missed, I believe, what, 4 quarters in a row now. So I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell that by the chart, but I believe they've missed 4 quarters in a row. They're pricing in 675, and I mean, you would think at some point they'd figure out how to beat, but based off recent history, I mean, you probably are expecting like another weak quarter. That doesn't necessarily translate to the stock getting hit. So like that's why cat's so tough, is because sometimes they care and it gets hit. Sometimes they don't care and it rallies. You never really know what to expect. I feel like the bigger move could potentially be if they actually surprise to the upside, because probably not too many people actually expecting that. But then again, it might be like a lower probability outcome. So, it's a toss up to me. And then Chevron, which is pricing in 3, and Exxon, which is pricing in $1.80. So kind of similar setups. They're probably going to react similarly. And I mean, oil has just been brutal in 2020. Energy stocks have been crushed. And of the two, Exxon's a little bit more interesting to me, because if I go out to like a longer term chart, you'll see that it's hovering right above like a really critical long term level of support. I can't even keep going back further. There you go. Now you can see. So it's hovering above like a really critical like 8-year level of support. And I mean, this is going to have to be good, because if it's not and it really breaks below 65, this could be in some serious trouble. I mean, of the two, this seems more interesting just because of that, like the more critical nature of the setup. But we'll see where it's at, because they don't report till next Friday. A lot can change the next, in the 4 days prior to that. So we'll see where it is. But I have this on the radar now, potentially as like a bearish trade idea. All right, I need a nap after that. Oh man, so much. It's going to be a crazy week. It's going to be, you got the Fed meeting too. I mean, just going to be a wild one. So definitely get your game plan in place. Rest up this weekend, and we're going to get after it next week. All right. So if you like these videos and you're looking for more information on options education or more option trade ideas, please follow up with the link in the description of the video for more information on options in play. All right. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will talk to you guys all next week.